Well, we're doing these personal pensées. I don't know how long it'll take, but I enjoy doing this. That's all right. I've now got them, as you can see, where there's only one per session. So it makes it a lot easier for you to read them and follow them. And this was the first one we did. We're no longer defined by the pain of our bounded past, but by the joy of our unbounded future. Oh, I should mention, by the way, what happened last Friday before I go any further, because I had an opportunity to go to Covington, Louisiana. It was a bittersweet affair because it was my friend's funeral, and he and I had a strong covenant relationship. I've never quite heard of this. When I was speaking at Windy Gap. How many of you have been? A few of you have probably been to Windy Gap, but over 400 men go to that thing. And I've done a few times with speaking. But in this particular weekend, it was like 1997, I think. I knew my friend Edgar from New Orleans. He's from my times going down there. But something happened as people were leaving and they would hug each other and say goodbye. I did it with Edgar and I couldn't let go. We couldn't let go. Something amazing happened, never happened to me before or since, where I began to receive his pain and he received my pain. And we were weeping. It was almost 5 minutes. We couldn't let go. It was a kind of exchange of the souls. I've never quite heard of that before, but it was a covenant that took place there. It was a powerful relationship, and we have done so many things together in the years since that time. So for me, it's a great loss, but it's a tragedy, but for us, but a comedy for him in the sense that he's now in that context. So it was an extraordinary opportunity, and he instructed in his, he had left instructions for his funeral. And he specifically said, if Ken Bo is available, I would like him to share the gospel at my funeral. So I read that out loud to them. There were 300 people at his funeral. And I read that and said, you have to blame this on Edgar. Why does he want me to preach this gospel? What is this gospel? And because he wants you to be with him. And then we went into this process, and I used Jesus in his own words and talked about two kinds of people, those who do not believe in this. They're here for Edgar's sake, but they don't buy into this thing with Jesus. I said to them, you need to make sure you understand that agnosticism is not a viable option when it comes to Jesus. You owe it to yourself. I always appeal to people's intellectual pride to make an informed decision as to whether you're going to receive him or reject him. But to ignore him is not an option. That's tantamount. So I did that. And then there's another group here. Those of you who have religion but don't know Jesus. You believe it. You can even maybe recite the creeds, but you don't know him. You haven't transferred your trust from yourself to him and receive that gift. So I took him, Jesus in his own words, I showed it to them, and I prayed the prayer at the end of committing to Jesus out loud. I mentioned it only that one time, but we have some in the back. And then we went on. And then having spoken about that, I spoke about womb world, which I've done with you more than once. Remember the whole idea of your mother's womb, and that's one womb that you couldn't live in there forever. And you're in another womb now. And so what we call death isn't death at all. It's a second birth canal. And so it was a good experience but they snarfed up the 96 books that I had brought in the case. I wish I brought another book with. But you know, what I love about that is how many people prayed that prayer. I don't know. How many people will be affected by that? But half the people stood up when his son Abel actually asked, how many of you have had your lives touched by this man? Because he's one of the most relationally intense guys I've ever known. It was half the people stood up. Their lives were transformed and affected by Edgar's life. And I found out about things that I didn't even know about that. So he's one of those unsung heroes in many contexts. And I want you to be such a person. I want you to be a person, a knight of faith. I want you to be a man of the word and a man who finishes well and lives well, because what you do, it has ripple effects for eternity. And that's just so important. But you can see these pensées, now going back as my segue to the pensées, many of them have to do with the very thing I was telling you about, namely an eternal perspective in this temporal arena. Because for me, it was bittersweet. Tragedy, if this is all there was, if this life was it, it's a terrible tragedy. But it is not. And I'm training myself more and more, as you've heard me say again and again, trying to find creative ways of amplifying my imagination and my aspiration for more than this world sustains or provides. I've been trying to do that in various exercises and imagining various things that I have loved to do. What it would be like if we could do those things in this earth, how much better that would be there. So it's an interesting angle to take. I'll move forward now, but the more we crave the next world, the less we cover this world. And I was struck by how many of these things, these pensées, really do relate to now and then. And I shouldn't be surprised in a certain way, because I found an article I wrote back in 1975, just 3 years after graduating from Dallas Seminary, on developing an eternal versus a temporal perspective. It's been a major motif in my thinking, because, as I've told you before, Jesus spoke more about that than any other topic. We hear he spoke more about money. Money was an illustration of the temporal versus the eternal. It's where your portfolio is, whether it's on this world or it's on the next. But you will be building a portfolio. And so I won't go into this one, it's too long. Again, shaped more by suffering, sorrows, and setbacks than by our successes. Eternal lens of adversity. Renovation. The renovation is what we're looking for in the future, what's going to take place. Unfinished business. You see, we have borrowed time, but you better be aware of this could be your last day. Never presume on another day. And so, again, and then even here, the Christocentric vision makes us more relevant in this world, and then loving people, sojourners in the painful land of the dying in preparation for eternal bliss in the land of the living. Getting old isn't an option, getting wise is. Anything worth pursuing will always be costly, but a realistic cost-benefit analysis reveals that we will only flourish by paying the dreadful price tag. It is a price. That's where I stopped. You see my little line? That's how I know. That's where I stopped. So it's gone. Now, I have a few more of these, and then we'll see what we do. We're called to live with eternal impact in the temporal arena, and you well know that this whole motif, as I've just described, then really does encapsulate a lot of these things, this whole idea of a competing paradigm between the temporal and the eternal, between the here and the now and the future. There's various value systems, the idea that what's tangible versus intangible. Doesn't it take faith to believe that what's not seen is more to be treasured than what's seen? And that we don't have yet is to be embraced more than what we currently possess. It does take faith. And so one is cultural, the other is biblical. But remember, the cultural aspect and understanding will only be naturally fed by the world of flesh and the devil. Those forces will continually tether you to this grounded understanding of the world and drive you and draw you to a graceless world, whereas it's just a matter of get what you can and it's over. And so we have a biblical vision that's far more rich and robust than anything we could imagine there. And so I'm saying eternal impact. So in my view, our few years, our few decades, just as when I did that womb world thing for them, in the bios, we all have biological life, we all have the first birth, but no one's born with the second birth automatically. That's something that we are involved in, and that has to do with the Zoe, the eternal life of God. So what's interesting is in this temporal arena, you've got about 9 months to get prepared for biological life. You got maybe 9 decades, if you're extraordinary, to have the Zoe, in a soulish life, preparing in this world. But there is an analogy, and both are temporary arenas to prepare us and to have that vision. But the wonderful thing about that is that let's call it 80 years that a person may have in this world, goes by so quickly, and as we know, the very experience of aging accelerates time. Anybody who's my age knows that the decades go quicker than each one is faster than the one. Each year is quicker than the one before. It's just been a kind of a universal experience. And I think that's divinely given to us in order to remind us that the years are to cling to the precious present. That's all you've got is the now. So remember what we've said, you've only got 2 days. You should have only 2 days on your calendar. Today is the only day you actually have that's real, because yesterday you don't have anymore and tomorrow you don't know about. So you have to live the fullness of this day, which has its own birth, growth, and decay and death. It has its own seasons, like a whole mini life. And so living out this day in fullness, but the best way is to contextualize this day with the day of Christ when we stand before him. So how can I be so arrogant as to presume I have another year left? My friend Edgar died of a stroke. His body was trying to rally for almost a month, but it finally was just too much. It was too massive. And he had had a stroke when he was 43 years old. He had to completely relearn everything. And he was beginning to do that now, but then you could see, though, in the middle of it, he realized, I'm ready for home. And he had a passion. But he, again, lived with eternal impact in this temporal arena. And that's what I wish for and desire. Live each today and do not presume that you have another day beyond this day. And so what if you were to see Jesus tonight? Would that make a difference? If you knew absolutely for sure you're going to encounter Jesus at the judgment seat tonight, but how do you know you won't? It would be one day you can be sure it'll be so. So it's just the mindset I want us to cultivate in this arena. In the mysterious interface between divine sovereignty and human responsibility, God's will is not the same as his desires. Now, this is one I want you to chew on for a minute. God's will is for all to be saved and come to a knowledge of the truth. Doesn't he say that? That's what he wants? But that's not the same. That's his desire, but it's not his will. His desire would be that all would be saved and come to a knowledge of the will. But in his own plan, they're not congruent because of the awful grace that he's given to us to give these human beings the capacity to resist and to reject his loving initiatives. That's the risks of love. And as C.S. Lewis well put it, the only place where you can be completely free from all the dangers and risks of love, perturbations he called them, is hell. There you'll be safe. You won't have any problem then. Because there will be no love. There will be no other. All enclosed in the black hole of the self. But here you have this idea of God's giving us this grace, this awful grace, and his will is not the same as his desires. But then I say in the fearful grace of choice, because your choice matters. What he's given you, you can't contribute anything to God, but you can participate. He's given you the dignity of agent causality. He's given you the capacity to do something this day that's going to have a lingering bearing on the lives of the people you touch today. It's a grace and a power and really a great gift. But we're responsible for the degree to which they are congruent. I do believe there's some mysterious way in which you can, through your desire to be a grace-filled life, to live in such a way that his desires and his will for your life become more and more the same. Does that make sense to you? Any questions on that? Because I want to make sure that's clear. And I began to realize that there's a strange agency in which you are a participant. Again, you don't actually contribute, but you participate in the work of God. And you're not a robot or an automaton. It's not fate and kismet or determinism. You matter. And every day matters, and every choice matters, and there's no small act of love that will not ultimately have a ripple effect on other people. So this very day, I want you to live it as if you're going to give an account, and Jesus is going to ask you tonight. Say at midnight. If you knew for sure it would be midnight. What are the questions he's going to ask you? And you pretty well can guess what the questions will be in the final exam. So what do you think the final exam will consist of? Well, we are stewards, and it's required of a steward that he be faithful. And he will ask us to give us an account, and he will examine us at that purgation where each man's work will be tested by fire. to determine the quality of the work. And you have only two options. Your foundation, if you know Jesus, is the grace of Christ. It's the grace of the gospel. But the superstructure is based upon rewards, you see, are based upon faithfulness to opportunity. And so what did you do with what I gave you? I have a belief it'll have to do with your time. What did you do with your time that you had? Your abilities, your time, talent, treasure. But the truth that I gave you and the people that I put in your life, did you build truth into people? Those two things are going to last forever. I have a feeling he's going to ask me those kind of questions. I better be prepared for the exam. Because one time you will have to give that exam. As again, I've often put it, it's easy to lip sync in the chorus of life. Think about that. But each of us was going to have to sing solo before Jesus. And that makes the difference in the world, all the difference in the world. When I was at Oxford, I had my supervisor, Richard Swinburne, was one, and this was in the 80s. It was in there from 86 to 88. He and Alvin Plantinga were regarded as the two greatest philosophers of religion at that time. And he was a rigorous man, Swinburne. He was like my big knock in Lewis's life. And so he says, Mr. Vo, I'm going to teach you to think and write rigorously, with rigor. And darned if he didn't. It was astonishing because whenever I would go to see him, my supervising, I'd have to write a paper, and I'd have to submit it 3 days before I met with him. For 90 minutes, we'd have a 90-minute session. See, that's why I say each of us is going to sing solo before Jesus. You can lip sync in the chorus, but you're going to sing solo. So in this case, I had nowhere to turn. I had 90 minutes, and he would have his own copy of the paper. I have mine. And everything he marked, he was going to make me defend. And he would not let go of that thing until I got it right. And then he'd say, fair enough. And then he'd go to the next one. And I lived for his fair enough. I already now have a sort of a feel of what the judgment seat will be like, because I was in terror before this guy. But I realized, and that's why the last paper I wrote for him, it was one of the great moments, because I switched supervisors because my topic changed from the philosophy of religion mostly and into theology and psychology. So my next supervisor was Rowan Williams at Christ Church, who became the Bishop of Monmouth in Wales, and then the Bishop of Wales, and then the Archbishop of Canterbury. But with my last session with Swinburne is belief in God properly basic. I still remember the question. And at the end of the paper, 16-page paper, had two little words. Quite good. Quite good. For him, that's like jumping over backwards. And I'm telling you, I now have a feeling of what if the praise of a man like that is so meaningful to me, how much more should I really want to hear, well done, you see. That's the message here. So I have a little hint of what that's like, you see. It's a nice thought. Love abundantly, think soundly, work heartily. And you can see the interior, the love, which is the heart. The thinking is your head, and the work is the work of your hands. So you have the whole heart, head, hands dimension here, the being, knowing, and doing. So my whole philosophy related to content always is this interior life. What does it mean to love well? And that's a matter of the heart. It's the interior person. But that also, you are also not only to love the Lord your God with all your heart, but also with your soul, your mind, your strength. Love with your mind means you want to think well. You don't want to be, it's dishonoring to God to be sloppy in your thinking. There's a lot of sloppy stuff that goes on in the name of Christianity that's unworthy of the gospel. And it's dishonoring to God for you to do that. If you're going to do it well, or don't do it at all, is the whole idea. Do your work well. And that has to do with loving well, then learning well, and then living well. Living out. So you are truth into action by becoming a man of truth. You're an incarnation of truth. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Now you are the Word become flesh, because where is Jesus now? Is he not in you? So now the Word who made all things dwells within you and wants to be manifesting his life in you and through you as you, which means that you become a manifestation of the life of Christ in your sphere of influence, wherever you go. Stuart, maybe you've heard this expression, I'm not sure. I heard this phrase that wherever we go, there we are spreading the invisible geography of the new creation. Isn't that a beautiful image, though? I don't know. I thought you might have found, I don't know where it came from. It's not mine. But it's a good infection with Lewis, yeah. But I love the image of wherever you go, you spread the invisible geography of the new creation. Isn't that a lovely metaphor? Because you are an agent of the King. And so every encounter, because we're living in the context of a war. And it's a war that would tether us to this world. The world, the flesh, the devil. So we have those three gravities. But you can live and be an overcomer if your heart is well established. And therein lies the key issue. In my mind, the interior life is the key to the exterior. So who you are here, but you want to make that, you see there's a reciprocal relationship between them all, because learning well should help you to love well. They should reciprocally enhance one another. Attitude and action. So when you do something well, and you have an action, it's going to affect your attitude. It's belief and behavior, attitude and action. There's a reciprocal relationship between them. And so in my thinking here, going back to my little pensée, abundantly, soundly, and heartily is the image here. My next one is stop believing, hoping, and trusting in gods that don't exist. There's a lot of gods false gods that are running around, and I remember I gave you 10 P's. These are idols for destruction. Remember, these are like gods that don't exist. A god of pleasure, prestige, or promotion, or power, or performance, or people, or position, popularity, physique. We all have all of these as pulls, some more than others. Like for one person, I've shown this before, but Mr. Green, his particular issue is his number one. If you rate them, his number one deal is pleasure. And popularity is not as big a deal to him, whereas it's the other way around. Pleasure is much bigger for one person than for another person. And you can see we all have our own flesh signatures, but my point is none of them produce what you're looking for. Not one of them. They're gods that don't exist. They don't have any substance, no reality. They consist of love, joy, and peace. Or perhaps I'll put the whole thing there. And then you have them all, don't you? And what I love about this is that you and I are called to live a life that demands an explanation. Because if the Spirit of God's work in you is going to be love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, it will manifest a fragrance of Christ. But the beauty is the fruit of the Spirit in one man's life is not the same as in another man's life. Because you see, you have a unique fragrance, a unique way of expressing it, don't you? Which is a lovely thought. It's what I call a unique spirit signature, that God's given you that dignity, whereby not only you get to participate in his work, but also you get to do it in a way that no one else quite can do or ever can do again. So heaven's going to be quite interesting, because no two people will be identical in that respect, which is a lovely thought. So when I think about this concept then of not buying into these demons, these gods that don't exist, but rather transfer our trust. And I have to say, I am astonished every time I read through these scriptures. I know what's going to happen, but I still marvel at the stupidity of these people who kept on basically shooting themselves in the foot. And how could they do it? And a godly man like David, for example, and he shoots himself in the foot more than once. Yeah, Abraham does the same thing. And it's amazing to me how brutally honest the scriptures are about such men. Why is that the case? In fact, it's the exception. It's the exception to find a major figure of whom there's no sin. Daniel is one. Joseph is another. And I would say the other one that comes to my mind would be Ezekiel. I don't see anything that those three men did, but it's a rare exception. Yet David, after all his adultery and all his murder and all his coveting and all his nonsense, was called at the end, he was a man after God's own heart. That's called grace. So God gives us better than we deserve. If you will merely return, if you will just return, you see. No, not that there weren't consequences. And you remember, the sword will never leave your house. There came a point of no return, and the consequences weren't there. But forgiveness and grace does not mean that there are no consequences. But even here, in the purposes of God, the consequences themselves are redemptive. Think of it this way. So He's not punishing you. He's purging you, purifying you. You see the difference? His discipline is not to condemn you, but to bring out something better in you. And if the lesser measures won't work, he has plenty of things he can do that'll get your attention even more. So my favorite expression of that is from C.S. Lewis. So wonderful were his homely illustrations when he said that when I was a little boy, if I had a toothache, I didn't want to let my mother know, because if I did, she'd give me aspirin or something to help it feel better, but she'd also do something I didn't want. She'd take me to one of those dentists. And those, you never know what they're going to do. They're going to start looking at other teeth that don't even hurt at all. You give them an inch and they'll take an L, as was the expression. So I didn't want to go to those dentists, especially, this was not the ages of pain-free dentistry, I'm going to tell you. But so it was a good reason for not wanting that. But the point is, though, that the thing itself is a sign, a symptom of something that needs to be dealt with. It needs to be processed. And that painful process is often the only thing that will actually purge and purify. And God's desire is to even allow as I've said before, our sorrows, setbacks, and sufferings, use those to draw us to sanctification. So God's grace in you is such that even when we shoot ourselves in the foot, if you will return and repent, He is there to receive you back. He's the God of the second chance. And isn't that a lovely truth? But He will give you grace that we didn't have before. And I think I'll just do this last one here. Our joy must not depend on earthly outcomes. It must rest in eternal outcomes. We must never condition our joy through the lens of the temporal. So what again I'm saying is that it's not the outcome of this world. We can have all the things we want in this world, and it's just not enough. But it's what's going to last forever. And so if I just look at how did it work out in this world, the real issue is how did it work out in the ages to come. So I want to have that perspective here, that it's internal outcomes, not the temporal outcomes that we have to train ourselves to long for. However, here's the rub. Most people, the eternal is too nebulous, too vague. Doesn't have any teeth. You see, it doesn't have any claws. It doesn't pull us in. So I find myself having constantly to enhance my imagination so I can long for home. And it takes some creative endeavor to do this. But why is it that most people, most believers, would rather have a couple more years on this world, or clinging for a few more years, maybe so I can see this or to do that or to be there for this person? That's sub-biblical. You should want more and more to be with Jesus and not to cling to the fading things of this world. And it's counterintuitive and countercultural, but you have to desire. The outcomes you're looking for are things that are not going to be in this world, but they're going to be things in the next. And I believe that we are called then to gain and to pursue profit, but to begin to long for and to treasure, to have a heart that treasures of things according to their true value. Remember, I've told you this before, and I'll stop with this, that Jesus never asks us to do something or to give something up, to have experienced pain or loss, to lose ourselves without doing what? Offering us something better in return. It's not a net zero. In fact, he says, I'm offering you something better than what you would have pursued on your own. You would choose the secondary good. I would give you the better good, but you don't treasure it as a better good because you don't know what your best needs are. Only your Father knows that. The world will try to define you and tell you this is what to go for, and most people are seduced, even believers. In many cases, it's a hard and sad thought that for many believers, the only difference between them and non-believers is their profession of faith. But otherwise, I don't see any real evidence for it. I remember this card once had, if you were arrested for being a Christian, would there be enough evidence to convict you? That's an interesting thought in your practices and actions. But the idea is, it's not merely theory, it's practice. And his desire is for gain and profit. So please understand that God has wired you for gain. He's wired you for profit. Just make sure that what you define as profit is what God defines as profit. Because the things that are highly esteemed among men, Luke 16, are despised in the sight of God. That chilling word that many men will give their lives in exchange for what God says is worthless. And may it be that you're not one of them. That you would ask, what do I aspire for? What do when Jesus asks you this question, what do you seek? What is your answer to that? Honestly, be honest with you. And if you don't seek him more than anything else, do you want to seek him more than anything else? You see? If you don't love him more than anything else, do you want to love him more than anything else? And he gives you the grace of holy intention. Even the desire to be pleasing to him is itself pleasing to him. He gives us more grace than we know. But our need is to treasure what God says is important and to cling to his promises that he's preparing us for home. So let's go ahead and go back. I'm going to go back to one of these here. This business here, and I want you to chew on this at your table. How is it possible for you to be an agent? It's a mystery. I can't understand it. I'm dealing with, when you're talking about divine sovereignty and human responsibility, the book that I have, my book, God I Don't Understand, says you're not going to understand it. But you have to hold the tension in place and keep hold of it. But there's some mysterious way in which you matter. You're a player. And you want then to make sure that that God's desires for you would be more and more connected with his will for your life. And how can you be a player in that? So let's talk about that. Okay, good. Well, we had an interesting discussion. I admit this was a complex concept. And were there any questions? I have a little application I want to make from this particular principle that came to my mind. But before I did that, I wanted to see if there was any particular thing that needed to be clarified. Did this make sense, though, this idea, that this pensée? It's not an easy one, but it makes sense because you're a player. Your actions matter. It's nothing, there's no neutrality as well. This is the idea. There's no neutral ground. It's either moving you toward him or away from him. There's no little decisions because, again, good and evil both increase at compound interest. He was righteous in a very little thing, will also be righteous in much. He was unfaithful in the very little thing, will also be unfaithful in much. So the little things matter. And then it's a tapestry woven out of the fine threads of little decisions. And then the small things add up and manifest themselves. Because let me, I don't see a hand, so I'm going to show you this. Okay, if there is any. But I wanted to share this because it's also related to remember we talked about chronos and kairos? This very principle. Because chronos is what you plan, But Kairos, you don't plan. You can't plan Kairos. It's God's opportunities. And then I see it. Remember how I described there are two responses to a Kairos invitation, either as an interruption or what's the other one? An invitation. You see the difference? So my claim is a Kairos moment when we are called, when the Spirit of God puts you together with a person, a situation, whatever it happens to be. I remember some very specific ones yesterday, but when that happens, you didn't have it on your planner, but my argument is that the most important thing you do in terms of the economy of the kingdom of God will not be on your planner. It will actually be in God's planner, so that the invocation and evocation of the work of the Spirit of God is to see and treat these interruptions as invitations. What does this mean to do? I'll give you one example of such a thing. So that on Wednesday morning, as I was about to leave at 6:35 for my Wednesday morning study, my garage door stopped midway. And no matter what I did, I couldn't get it to go above halfway. I couldn't get my car out. And so I had an interesting thing then. So I called my friend Bob Margolin, and Bob was gracious enough, and I called him just at the right time. He had just gotten on Peachtree Road, and so he was able to get to my house so soon that I was only 9 minutes late for the study, which I did not expect to happen. And it was a good experience and we had a good time together on that drive. And then I had an opportunity to be with another friend who would drive me back to my house. And this guy, Whit Smith, who teaches, he's a professor of engineering at Georgia Tech. And we had this fabulous time, best we've ever had. And it wouldn't have happened if it weren't for this garage door, because he drove me. We had this breakfast meeting, and then we processed some amazing things together, which would have never happened before. And then he drove me to my house, and I showed him around a little bit, and we had a great chat there as well. All of which is to say that wouldn't have happened, but I construe it, and you should as well, as an invitation. Well, the guy did fix the garage door. And he's going to come next week and do the work, because it's been overdue for getting some work done anyway. And so that's all good. But you get what I'm saying. Treat it, why is it happening? Instead of whining, why me? Ask him, what do you want me to learn in this? And so show me what this is an invitation to do something, then it makes complete sense to walk in that manner as well. I can't resist this, but because when we were driving to Covington, Louisiana to go to the funeral last Thursday, I was with my friend Raymond Walker and Kelly Talamo, and we had a lot of great fun together, made a road trip out of it, and we really had some great chats. But all of a sudden, when we went to one rest stop, and he must have hit something a little bit, because all of a sudden when he got 60 miles an hour on I-65, it would start you'd hear a sound of it, and it was this little flap that you have under your car to protect the engine from the oil and all. And that the front end part of that was, if you went to a certain speed, the air would push it down, and you'd scrape on the surface. So we had to have it fixed. This was an interesting experience. We had a collective grace experience. And without going into detail, right there, about 2 miles down the road from us, we were going very slowly, there was a state trooper. So we pulled behind him and asked him what you know of a place. And he said, next exit, make a left turn, 1.5 miles on the right. There's a place that would service cars. So we took his advice, because there were no signs in this next exit. And we got off. And at first, we thought he was wrong, but we passed it. But then we found it. Guess what it was? It was a body shop. The perfect place. Because you see, and not only was it a body shop, but there was a stall right in front of one of the garage doors. It was no car. He pulls right up to the thing, And 3 of them come and say how they can help us and so forth. And then next thing I know, the guy gets in the car, drives it on the lift, and repairs the thing because that's what they do in body shops. And he tied it up so it wouldn't, and not even 15 minutes, and it was free. Naturally, we gave him some, but so we all shared a moment of grace because this doesn't normally happen. This could have really put off our trip. So it turned out that the net effect was positive, not even neutral, because it gave us a collective experience of the surprising grace of God in that process. You see, so that if you receive it, instead of why is this happening or wondering or getting bummed out, it's actually an invitation to an adventure. If you think about it, it's just not you're not in control. But guys don't like that part. But remember, there's the third word here, and it's kenosis. Kenosis is the emptying. He emptied himself. So you have to empty yourself of your illusion that you know what your best interests look like to receive a kairos invitation as an opportunity. You have to realize that even though it doesn't seem convenient to you, actually God's got a better plan in here for you. You see the point there? I hope that makes sense to you. So they go together. And then the other thing I thought about besides that was this little card here that I've told you about before. I really want to invite each of you to become more conscious of the role of the Holy Spirit in your life, to evoke the Spirit this day, to bring people to mind or things to mind, you see, so that you become more conscious, because the Spirit, if you ask him, show me what to do here, or I'm inviting you to guide me and so forth, he'll do it. And he'll give you opportunities. So I want you to live a more spirit-filled or spirit-driven life, guided life. That's what I would like for you. Yes, right over here. I hope that made sense, though, with my explanation, but I think it's an application I find made it connected very well. Yes.
Thank you so very much for bringing up the Holy Spirit. He seems to be the forgotten God, and we just don't call on him enough.
That's right.
And Jesus says, I've left you a helper, and we don't call on that helper. And I've run across very bright people that have done very well in life, but I know they didn't reach their pinnacle because they didn't call on the Holy Spirit.
Yes.
And as I mentor, I make sure that I'm constantly talking about the Holy Spirit for these young people.
That's a good word. So these 12 ministries, let's put them up there, of the Holy Spirit are in these 2 cards, and we went through these together. If you recall, we did I think it was a 4-part series on these. But I cannot invite you urge you too strongly to make this a part of your culture. I like the sequence here, and it just makes me more conscious of really how he affects every part of your life if you allow that to happen. So he must be invited. He's not going to push himself. And so you have to do that. But the more you do it, and the more you obey, suppose he puts a name in your mind, and you invite him to do that, now you're getting more active, and then you notice, act on it then. Write to them, call them, whatever you're supposed to do. I get these all the time. And every time you obey what he prompted you to do, you will slightly enhance your capacity to hear his voice next time. Because remember, I've said obedience is the portal of divine disclosure, so that if you obey, that's the pathway for God to reveal himself to you. So do what he says, he'll reveal himself. And the more he reveals, the more he'll show you. But then he'll bump up the ante of risk because he's going to show you new things. And then you have to obey that. And so it's a constant process of growth, of education, of God's desire for you to become more and more conformed to the image of his Son. And he'll do nothing less than what's required to make that happen, which is a great good. He won't let you go.
Can you bring more of those cards?
Yeah, Bob, let's bring some of those cards. Yeah, that'd be good to do.